And then he's like, I'm going to walk over there. And he takes about 2.5 steps. My vantage point, poof, he's gone. I'm like,
Oh
wait.
Welcome back to the iJupiter podcast. I'm your host, Tom Franklin, and today we have on Kevin Kehne from the Arizona Squatch. He is friends of the great Chris Kramer. He's been on the show a couple times, and we kind of talked a little bit backstage, and the reason they're coming forward is that a lot of things are happening, and they feel compelled to do so. So if you keep finding yourself coming back to the iJupiter, please like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a little comment at the bottom, hit that thumbs up button. All those things happen. Oh, and you can really help me out by going over on Rumble. I need quite a couple more, and then I'll actually be able to put my stuff forth a little bit more. So that's looking promising over there. If you guys are interested in some merchandise, I actually have some new T-shirts. Pretty cool stuff there. I got a little pyramid going on, and I got a nice little Sasquatch. Let's see what it is. You can find me on all your podcast players, and so enjoy it, share it, and let me know what you guys think. So with all the housework out of the way, let's welcome Kevin Kehne from Arizona Squatch.
Yep. Hey guys, how you doing? Pleasure to be here, Tom.
Thank you for coming on. Like I was saying, I was contacted by the great Chris Kramer, and I was talking to you a little bit about backstage about it. When I first met Chris, he was very skeptical about podcasting in general, because he takes it seriously. So we actually talked for, it was like 30 minutes before he even decided that he would come on. And then a couple days ago, he's like, my buddy Kevin wants to come on and talk about it. So would you have him on? And of course, man. So thanks for coming on.
Hey, like I said, my pleasure. And first and foremost, yes, I have my YouTube channel, Arizona Squatch, but right now we are moving more into focusing the Arizona 4 because that started out as we were all independently on our own journey, and we one way or another, one reason or another, we all wound up together, and so we are the Arizona 4, and so our experiences are just literally off the chart.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing. He was telling me he had a story about his father passing away like about a year and a half ago, and maybe not even that long ago, and that he went up there and he had an incredible experience. You guys are going up there somewhere between 3 national forests, if I remember correctly.
Well, it's kind of on the Mogollon Rim in central Arizona. On one section of the rim, it's the Apache Sitgraves National Forest, and right about where we go is the boundary between Apache Sitgraves, Coconino National Forest. But as soon as you come off of the Mogollon Rim, which is about 1,000+ foot uplift, it's Tano National Forest. So it's basically boundaried on 3 national forests.
Oh wow! Yeah. It's Kevin, please do me a favor. Like, give us a little bit of backstory about yourself. Maybe where I'm going to need you to send me the links to everything you guys are pushing. If you could do me that favor, and go ahead and promote yourself, and go for it, man. Let people know who you are.
Yeah. Well, I'm me.
Hi, you.
All right. I'm a very avid outdoorsman. I'm married, 4 kids, 21 grandkids.
Wow.
Was an Eagle Scout, Did a little over 5 years in the United States Army till I was injured in Operation Desert Storm. Now I'm retired, which gives me all the time in the world I need to go out and do what it is I do, or what we do. And it's just been an incredible journey. Stating that, I'm, a lot of wilderness survival stuff, a lot of long distance backpacking, vast majority of my life in the outdoors. I did have an experience back about 1980, 82, somewhere in that time frame as a Boy Scout on the Mogollon Rim, and that's a story I'm more than willing to get into. But so that was first experience, and and that's what always in the back of my head, was there's something going on out in the woods. It's just back then, never once thought Bigfoot or anything like that. We were young kids. We got the story of the Mogollon monster, and that's what we thought we were dealing with, was a monster, and we thought we were going to be eaten alive. And
yeah, they always do a lot of stories that, like, when you're a kid, they're like, don't go too close to the woods, the witches will get you. So there's something to that. So you were a veteran of Desert Storm. So back in what, 91?
91, correct.
91. Yeah. I'm a veteran myself. I did the Kosovo conflict. So it's just like, what, maybe a generation removed, basically, is what we are.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. So these experiences that you're having, like, because when you're in a combat situation, you're prepared. I don't know what you did. Were you 11 Bravo, or what was your job?
No, I was actually a light wheel mechanic.
Okay, 63 Delta.
Bravo.
Bravo.
Yeah, 63 Bravo, Hotel 8. Which is off-road recovery specialist. I was also I was also an NBC specialist, nuclear, biological, chemical warfare.
The metal, exactly. The metal.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I took my career serious. I was looking at being a 30+ year guy.
No kidding.
Yeah, and I was actually slated for flight school to fly Apaches, but the Gulf War started up, and I went over there and got injured and medically discharged, so never got to fly. But I'm still alive. I'm here, and I couldn't be any more blessed than I am. To be out doing what we're doing with a group
23
of guys.
grandchildren, my friend. You are truly blessed.
21.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. No pressure, guys. No pressure.
Yeah. We're waiting on the grandkids now, or great grandkids.
Fair enough, my friend. I was just so these experiences that you're having, like being I guess where I was trying to go is like being a vet and being in the military. We're prepared. We have a plan. We know what we're doing over there. We have a chain of command. We know we're going to see some crazy stuff, but at the same time, it's still human in nature. But when you're out there in the force and you're running into these things, like how does you're not prepared for that?
No. And going back to, when I was in the Boy Scouts, that first experience,
okay.
I'm going to give the Reader Digest version of it. It's a little more extent than this, but scout leaders had gone to bed. There was myself, 4 other scouts sitting around the campfire. Big rock gets thrown, hits a tree right behind me. Pine needles, everything on the fire, get it going. We hear footsteps running away, screaming at the scout leaders. And they're like, go to bed, boys. You're hearing elk or, critters or something, so this went on, over a period of about 4.5, 5 hours. But after the very first incident, there wasn't a chance in hell we were going to sleep, me and the other scouts. Scout leaders were construction workers, so they were out cold. And, so finally at the very end of all this, we got them up. They're sitting up in their sleeping bags, and a tree got snapped. The next morning we found the tree. Right about 9-10 foot level, 6-inch diameter pine tree, twisted and snapped. And when that thing snapped out there in the middle of nowhere, I mean, the echo that it made, was just deafening. So the one scout leader sat up, was like, oh, and pulls out a 44 and pops a round off in the air, and you hear what sounds like an elephant running through the trees. And I don't know how far away it got, not far, maybe 100 yards, and let out this, whoa! We were done at that point.
Yeah. So, I mean, what were you guys thinking? I mean, what was everyone thinking?
Well, that we were going to be eaten alive, but now this, and so how my memory tells me, and I don't know if it actually went this way, but it's like we all took turns, pulling guard duty, making sure nothing was coming in, keeping the fire going, and just not knowing exactly what was going on, misunderstanding, misinterpreting everything that was going on. So this was very key, to the things that we, the Arizona Four, have learned. But it's pretty staggering, when I look back, over the last almost 8 years I've been out doing this. I could give you about the hour count, right about 14,000 hours. That's neither here nor there. I've got probably 6,000 hours of audio recorded.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd run an audio recorder every night. But anyway, so back to that first episode as a Boy Scout. The fact I ever went out in the wilderness again is beyond me, because at that exact moment, I was more terrified there than I was at any moment during combat operations. So
right, dude. Hey, you're good at this, man. You swung that right back around and put the key right in the keyhole. That was awesome. So you retired. Then did you start doing what you do before you retired? It was like a warrior thing.
Yes and no. It's a lot of solo backpacking, especially in the Superstition Mountains in Arizona, and just a lot of weird stuff would happen up there. And I always just equated it to the spirit of the mountains, because not knowing what I know now. And, so moving forward, that that TV show, Not Finding Bigfoot or Finding Bigfoot or whatever it was called, came on. And, and I was, once again, I didn't know a damn thing, so I was pretty engrossed in it. I loved the show. I know it's made for TV, and I understand all that, but I would look for the little nuggets. It's discernment. And
right.
And, you can discern the bullshit from what's factual, and by reading people's body language and that when they're telling their stories. You can tell if it's something that they're embellishing, something they're making up, or something that's spot on. And so that's what I, kind of did with this show. And
right.
on season 3, they actually did an episode in Payson, Arizona. And I went, I knew it. So every time I'd go out in the outdoors, our family's big, avid outdoors people. So 2017, we're on a family camp out up on the Mogollon Rim at a place I now call Squatch Camp. And me and my son, we're out, we don't know anything, but, we're all beating on trees and,
right.
doing that whole thing. And I found this drainage, and I was like, well, let's go down this drainage. And so we started going down it, and then found a game trail, went on the game trail and found footprints. Very first time in my life I ever found footprints. They were 16-inch prints, and the gate was farther than I could, without actually having to leap. Yeah, so we're like, holy cow. And so we ended up going all the way down in the drainage, and I'm trying to make this as quick as I can. But
we have all the time you need, man. We have all the time you can, or there's no rush. No rush on this house.
I can go for hours.
Okay.
I can go
morning taken.
Yeah, but okay. So as me and my son start heading down this drainage, my son's, what was he? Probably 35 at the time. We're heading down the drainage, and I hear a knock. And, so I'm looking at my son, and he's just bebopping. He didn't, show any signs of hearing it. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm hearing shit. Yeah. So we get down the bottom of the drainage, and, we don't find any footprints down there. But while we're down there, Louisville slugger on the side of a tree. Whack! I was like, oh my God, there's one up there. And where we dropped off the game trail to go down in this drainage, that game trail, but probably 50 yards farther down is where that knock actually had come from. And so, and so this is key to, this is a key moment, so kind of take this and set it off to the side. But, so I spend probably about 15, 20 minutes looking for a stick that's not rotten, that's, big enough that I can hit the side of a tree, that it's going to make a noise, because most of everything that's on the ground, especially, in the area where we live, is mostly all ponderosa pine. It's rotten, So to find something that's solid enough on the ground to actually bam and hit the tree, it took 15, 20 minutes, but we found one. And so I hit the side of this big old tree, and we got a knock come back. And me and my son are like, oh my God, he's right there. And so my son says, I want to do it. I'm hand him the stick, and he hits the side of the tree. Knock, knock comes back. So we got a double knock. We're like, holy cow. And so I'm running through my head. Well, what do they do on that Not Finding Bigfoot or Finding Bigfoot show, whatever it was called? I don't remember. But anyway, so I did a whistle. Well, the other side of the drainage and farther down, we got a whistle back. It wasn't an echo. It was a different tone, and it was longer than what I did, and so we're like, there's one over there, so this is what kicked all this off, so we got up, we went up the trail. I want to put eyes on this thing. I'm in tracking mode. I'm on the hunt. And, at this point in time, I knew that they were another type of people. I'd never once in my life believed that they were some undiscovered ape. That they were something other than that. And, so I want to put eyes on this thing. This is a physical, I'm hearing the knocks and the whistles, and I'm going to find this guy. And, my son and I, we kind of leapfrog, tactical movements, and we got about to where we heard the wood knocks come from. And I stopped, and my son stopped, and I said, are you feeling that? And he says, yeah, we're not supposed to be here. I said, yeah. I said, we're out of here. And,
whoa. It was that palpable that you both noticed it.
Yeah. And so, I kind of hands up in the air and, took a step back, and I apologize. I don't know if you understand me. I don't know if, I don't know anything, but if you can hear me, I apologize. I don't mean to, be trespassing in your area. I'm just curious. And, so we started to back out of there. And about that time, we heard 3, maybe 4 distinct footfalls on the other side of this dogwood thicket, and it was just boom, boom, walking away from us. Yeah. So we're like, holy, so this is how this all progressed. And, so I ended up making a report with the BFRO because I didn't know any better. And so kind of went that route for a little bit, but the experiences, when I went back out with this individual from the BFRO who was part of the group for a while, but we sat and talked. This guy's a retired firefighter and fire chief, and he's very, he's pretty smart guy. And so we were talking, and we stayed up there. We went up there for 3 nights, and that's when my entire world went like this.
Okay.
He has his first night sighting. We're sitting facing each other, so I can see behind him. He can see behind me. Security. And where he's looking, I can't see because there's a rather large pine tree in the way. But he says, it's almost a full moon. And the moon was just coming up, so we got areas of light and areas of dark, and this one happened to be standing in the dark, but it was lit up behind him. So he got a clear view of this individual. But, I want to, I'm trying to look over to see what he's seeing, but I'm more concentrated on what's over here on my right, because I keep getting this feeling, very, very intense feeling of I'm watching you. Everything is okay, but I'm watching you, like you better mind your P's and Q's type thing. And, so this kind of stuff went on all that weekend. And, and on my way home, 130-mile drive, never once broke the speed limit, never once turned the radio on. I mean, I was just driving home and, in a stupor of, what did I just experience and how is this possible? And so that is what caused me to take this extraordinary dive into this that I did. I'm retired. I've got all the time in the world. Now, mind you, I've got a beautiful wife. I've got 4 children, 21 grandkids, and I had a dog at home. I had more than enough reasons to be home and not out in the woods.
Right. Especially being after you're retiring and doing all the work you've done all the years, especially with the injury you've had. Yep. Yeah. You're like, it's time for me to sit down and relax. But this is like I'd imagine, because I've never had an experience quite like that. Not like that at all. Actually, I mean, I've had paranormal stuff. I can imagine being, it's like the final frontier almost. Like what the hell is that?
Well, there's, we're taught to fear everything that goes bump in the night. We're taught that everything out in the forest, everything out in the wilderness, through, ancient stories, and what have you, that everything out there is out to get you. And I come to find that to not be true.
Okay. Okay. Let's get into that. I mean, like, what makes you feel that?
Well, it was okay. This is where it really starts to intensify. So after that first trip, I went out for that 3 nights, and had my world rocked. I went back out, and so now this is end of July, beginning of August of 2017. So now I'm just now starting to get my feet wet in this. I still don't have the slightest clue what I'm doing. I'm still pulling off of what I've seen on TV, trial and error.
Right.
And so I'm walking around. I don't know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for tracks. I've been on the internet, come across Mark Abel's stuff, from Colorado Bigfoot, and his energy overload page with all of his structures. And I can remember looking back at it going, man, everything that he's talking about is just windfall. What is he, okay, that one, yeah, that might be a structure. Well, once I started noticing these structures, I was like, he's onto something, the way some of this stuff is woven together. But anyway, as I drift off it, and
you digressed.
Yeah.
Well,
it does
a lot.
That.
It's a lot. Hey, don't you need to apologize at all, man? It's a lot.
Okay. So I go, sorry about that. I go down into Squatch Valley is what I call this place. I've got Squatch Camp, and then there's about, it's old growth forest down in there. It's kind of like being in a cathedral. It's you can feel the spirituality behind it. But, so I go down there and I'm bebopping around, and I'm looking for prints and structures, and, just no clue what's going on, but I could feel the presence down in there. And I come across this very large pile of human poop. It wasn't bear scat, it wasn't elk, it wasn't wolf, wasn't coyote, it wasn't a hippopotamus,
Right.
That was a big pile of human poop. But the interesting part about it was about 6 inches off of this, really large, probably a 300-year-old tree. And, so it was like he squatted and leaned up against the tree and went that way. And that was just my interpretation of it. Military experiences tied in, but
hunting,
yeah, but yeah, so I'm looking around and I see something that might be a structure, but I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's pretty suspect. It could be, it couldn't be. A confirmed possibility of a definite maybe. And so I start spiraling out from there. Now I'm looking for spoor. I'm looking for tracks. And I get out, probably about 20 yards away from this possible structure. There's a footprint in the mud, and it's going that way. So I go that way. And, it wasn't a huge print. It was, if I recall, it was 9 inches or 7 inches at the toes, 16 inches in length. I snapped a couple pictures of it and like, all right, cool. Let's, now I want to see where this thing's going. And, and it's a pretty tight draw down in there. And I get probably about 45, 50 yards, and there's a black mountain rattlesnake sitting there.
Oh, okay.
I attract rattlesnakes like lightning rods. I've spent 3 days in ICU over a bite.
No kidding.
Right here. Oh, yeah.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, but, so I'm looking at this snake and I'm like, dinner. Well, why do you want to eat them? Well, because I like the way rattlesnakes taste. Well, this is his home, not yours. I know, but, I really like the way they taste. And, well, look how beautiful he is. He is beautiful. Look how old he is. And, well, yeah, he is, and his rattles were probably from, where my thumb joint is to the top of my finger. It was a very old and beautiful rattlesnake. And, so I've got this conversation going on in my head. I can't understand why the hell I'm having this conversation with myself,
Right.
because rattlesnakes have always been trail food for me. I see them, I kill them, over the pack they go until I get to camp and, clean them and eat them. But this particular time, I'm having this really off the wall conversation in my head, and I just can't wrap my head around why I'm having it. And, so he's like, what gives you the right to take his life, was the last thing I heard. And I was just like, yeah, well, yeah, let him go. And at that point in time, the rattlesnake crawled underneath this windfall, big pine tree that had been blown over or rotted or whatever the case was. And so I got my phone out, and I'm on the other side of the log like this, trying to take video of it. And I finally get him to move, and I got the video, and I was happy with it. I was like, all right, cool. And I hit stop on the record. The moment I hit the stop on the record, about 30 feet in front of me on the other side of this dogwood thicket, the most powerful vocalization I have ever heard in my life. I've never heard anything like it prior or since. Lung capacity, reverberation, penetrating through me, hair from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, standing on edge. And what it was, what do you want? Well, hello, my friend. Hua! All right, I apologize if I'm not supposed to be down here. I'm leaving. I'm shook. I'm not terrified, but I'm shook, and I'm deeply concerned. And so I do 180. I'm beating feet out of there, not running, not running. I'm at a steady pace walking out. I can hear him paralleling me. I can hear the footfall. Never more than 25, 30 yards away from me. I can't see him. I can't wrap my head around it. I hear the footfalls. I can hear the breathing. I hear everything. I can't see him. Yeah, so I'm just kind of like, I don't know what's going on. And so I start talking. I'm like, my name's Kevin. Do you have a name? I have a mate. Do you have a mate? I have offspring. Do you have offspring? And I'm more doing this to try and bring a little comfort to myself. Yeah, maybe let him know,
Right. That makes
maybe
sense.
and to maybe let them know that, if you take me out, there's going to be a small army up on this mountain with heavy firepower looking for me. So time for you to mind your P's and Q's, was kind of, what was going through my head. And once again, I didn't know anything back then. So I come up out of this valley, and I get about, 150 yards away from camp, and he stops. And I took a few more steps, and I turned around, and I immediately got the feeling that he was just escorting me. Yeah. And, so I said, I apologize if I wasn't supposed to be down there, but I'm here at camp. Come and see me later. Bring the whole family, just kind of, just kind of talking out loud. And
I think that was accidentally the right thing to do, because, when I hear quite a few, Bigfoot encounters during the show that I do. And, there's really, in many cases, not too many rights and wrongs, but I think the one right is to go in with the right intention. And I think that is the correct one, being inviting and open. And I think normally people get much better, responses out of this than being like, I'm taking my gun, and if I see one, I'm going to, off it. I think that was accidentally the right way to go about it.
Yeah. Well, that what you just said is the primary reason they really don't want anything to do with us, because we're a bunch of assholes. We shoot up everything, we blow up everything, we cut down the trees, we build roads, we throw trash everywhere. They're not that way, and so I mean, there's a lot more to that, but that we'll just kind of scratch the surface with that. But so anyway, I get back to the camp that night. 6 of them came in, and it was a normal thing. 3 of them would walk this way. There was a spot that we called the room. That was a bunch of trees and an opening in it, that like another little camp spot. But mind you, I'm in desolate country. There's nobody within probably 15 miles of me at this point in time. And But so they'll come into the room, and three will come around to the front and a couple to behind me. And, they tactically post in up around. And, and I actually started to feel that comforting. And at one point I actually got in a mind speak that there will always be one watching me and I have nothing to worry about. And
wow.
Yeah,
what did that mean to you? What does that mean to you when they say that to you?
Well, due to three different situations that happened, the very first time I went to go back up to Squatch Camp, I'd been up there for 2.5 weeks, went home for, I don't know, 3 days and turned around and went right back up and was going to spend another 3 or 4 days up there. And I was heading over to my gift stump. I didn't even unload my truck yet. I just went straight over the gift stump because I actually left a big chocolate cake out there. Maybe they like chocolate cake. So I wanted to see, if anything had been done with that. But so I get up there and I start heading over the gift stump and I immediately get leave now, not safe. All right. Okay. I just got here. I just drove 130 miles. What do you mean I got to leave and it's not safe? Is there bear up here? Is there stupid humans up here? I mean, why? And all I got was leave now, not safe. All right. And I turned around and I left. I went home, 130 miles back home. And,
wow.
And that night my blood pressure shot up to like 197 over 105 or something like that. Is that a coincidence? Did they know that was going to happen? I've come to the point where I really don't believe much in coincidences. I apologize about that.
That's not a problem.
So that was just one of three different things that have happened that, the second one, I kind of blew them off and, that wasn't the right thing to do. And I was like, well, I'll never do that again. That had to do with a bunch of coyotes, but, so anyway, back to the Squatch Camp thing. After, the what you want, this is when it got real off the wall for me. So I have this dream vision. I lean more on the vision side because I can remember it, every detail of it, to this day. It's not like a dream that's like, I don't remember what I was dreaming about. But he walked up to me and introduced himself, and he's, without speaking out loud, he says, I am E. Aiden Gone. This is my mate, E. Aiden Gehne. And I can remember she was looking like, leaning out behind this tree and had this look of deep concern in her eyes. And he kept, it's okay, he's okay, you can come out. Well, she finally stepped out. She's holding an infant. I woke up going, wow. What the fuck? Yeah, it was just absolutely mind blowing. So now I'm only got probably a week out total experience time, and I'm having this kind of stuff going on. And so now I'm like, I got to know more. I've got to know more. I've got that first season I did 36 days out.
Wow.
When
is the season?
Well, like this year up on the Mogollon Rim, we're having a very dry season and it's horrible. But the average season, usually around end of November, beginning of December timeframe, when we get our first real heavy snow, they close all the roads up there. Nobody goes back into the forest unless you're on snowmobiles. But when you got anywhere from 3 to 10 feet of snow, it's not a good place for people to be driving around and
right,
what have you. It's just not a safe situation. So and typically it doesn't open back up until right about April 1st. Yeah, so you got April.
So right now.
Yeah, it's open right now. I've already been up there a couple times. But, so from April to November, well, if you remember, this started for me at the end of July. So basically, it was like the 29th of July. So August, September, October, and the beginning of November, I was up there 36 days.
Wow. That's like 1 month out of 4. That's a quarter of your time is spent up there because you were so intrigued by because it's, because what we hear, normally, is that these things are some offshoot of, the human genome or something, but yet you're having these intense dreams or whatever messaging and mind speak with him. So I kind of understand, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, and a few more things that happened this first year. So we'll jump to October, third week in October, and this is when I had my first daytime sighting. And I'm sitting there. The other guy that's with me, he goes into his van to put his bibs on. I was reading this article about the Apache Indian reservation, San Carlos Reservation, Mount Graham, the Vatican telescope, and the big fight that went on between them, and the Apache didn't want anybody up there because it's a sacred mountain, and that's where the Gan live, and that's a key point.
Yes, because the names that they told you, yes,
yeah, and so I was sitting there reading this, and what I hear is what I could best describe as something very large was in a tree, and the branch broke, and the big branch fell down through the tree, hit the ground, thud. I'm not saying that's what happened because there were no broken branches over there or anything. That's just the sound that I heard. That's what I relate the sound to. I stood up, I walked around this tree, and I went over and looking in the direction where I heard it. I'm like going, huh? No, yeah. And so I stood there and I'm watching this thing, and so I'm calling from my buddy, and I'm like, hey, and I turned like this to see what was taking him so long, and I turned my head back, and there's nothing there. And and this was, we shot it with a laser rangefinder, and it was 78 yards away, but I wasn't ready to call it a sighting. I've got to do my due diligence with this, and this is what we do as the Arizona 4, and what I've done from the beginning is, we've got to be very vigilant about what we're doing, because if you're going to be credible, you got to make sure that you're, crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's, and doing your due diligence, to make sure that it's like, oh, there's a bump in the woods. Oh, that was them.
Right.
It's not like that, because there's a lot of stuff out in the woods. So I marked, I rubbed my feet back and forth in the ground where I was standing, so I knew the exact spot I was standing in. And, the guy, my partner at the time, he was like, so did you have a sighting? I said, I can't say that yet. I need to wait till tomorrow night. I will stand here 15 minutes prior to 15 minutes after this time frame, because the light, the sun was just setting, sun shining through the pine trees, but it could be a million different things.
Okay.
And, the trick of the light, shadows,
right.
I have to be confident before I say I had a sighting. And, so I did everything I possibly could to recreate what I saw, and there was no recreating it. And, so, the bottom line was that was my first daytime sighting. Now the trip after that, which was like 5 days later, 6 days later, a whole bunch of people were coming up. I wanted to get out there and get my alone time, because I love my alone time out there. So I'm sitting there. It's night, and I've got the activity going around, the footsteps and the little clicks that they do, and a little bit of little women.
God.
Women talking, off, 40, 50 yards away that you can't quite make out what they're saying. So this is going on all around me, and I'm sitting there, and then I'm like, oh, let me back up. It's bottom of a coal mine, dark out. There's no moon out. Can't see my hand in front of my face. no lights, no campfires, just sitting in the dark. And I'm like, oh, brake lights. Now, wait a minute, there ain't nobody out
Whoa.
here. And so about 100, maybe 150 yards away, up in this pine tree, it looked like, somebody hit their brakes and lit up the tree. It was that kind of red. And I was just sitting there going, what the hell is that? Well, this red orb, from my vantage point was about this big. So at the distance away it was probably this big, and I'm watching this thing and it's drifting around in the pine trees where the branches are. And then it drifts off over this way and it just kind of fades out. And I'm like, what the fuck is, now, mind you, who Travis Walton is.
Travis Walton. No, I do not.
UFO abductee in the 70s in Arizona. They made the movie Fire in the Sky after him. Most credible.
I know the movie Fire in the Sky, but I don't know. Sorry, there's a lot to know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. It's the most documented, most credible abduction ever recorded.
I thought it was Fred and Barney. Was it not Fred and Barney? What's their names? It's a husband and wife duo. Yeah. That's the one I know very well.
Yeah, they're right about on that. But with Travis Walton, they were lost. They were. Barney. Yeah. Well, Ma.
I see a UFO.
Yeah. But they were loggers and they see this light and Travis gets out of the truck and he walks over to the light and up he goes. The other guys freak out and they haul ass.
Okay.
Where's Travis? He was stolen by a UFO, and it turned into a really big thing. Well, I don't remember how long it was after that. Travis Walton shows up outside of this little community called Christopher Creek, which as a crow flies is about 4 miles from where I'm at seeing this big orb.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm like going, all right, time to put on my A game. And, but then I start seeing all these little, it's like little LED lights popping on, popping off. Some are white, some are red, some are blue, some are, and it just, and they're doing this and then they quit. And I'm just sitting there going, what the fuck is going on out here? And then the orb, that big red orb, it's over here and it drifts this way and then it kind of fades out. And then there's twinkle lights all over the place. And, so I come off of this trip and I start diving into quantum physics, quantum mechanics, making my brain hurt because I'm trying to understand how I'm experiencing things that are supposed to be impossible. And I am routinely, and we, the Arizona 4, just routinely experiencing this stuff. I mean, one I've got a great story that was just from a couple years ago that I'll segue into after this because of the lights and that. We're up at Squatch Camp. It's Chris Kramer, Wayne Dillon, and myself. Wayne's an Army veteran also. Wayne's got his camper up there. We got stuff going on. Once again, it's bottom of the coal mine, dark. Can't hardly see anything. We end up walking out to a little 2-track road that comes into the campsite. And Chris was kind of looking to the north, and Wayne and I were looking to the south. And I think Chris might have turned around, but Wayne goes, "Did you see that?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "What did you see?" I said, "About a 9-footer walk across the road about 60 yards up or so." And he goes, "That's what I saw." Well, let's go over there. So we walk over there and we get to about the spot where I think, gosh darn it, where I think this is going on, and not feeling anything, not seeing anything. So we take probably about another 10 more steps and I get this, this deep sensation to look to my right. And so I look to my right and I'm like, "Guys, stop." And I said, "Please tell me you're seeing this." And it was like the 4th of July going off in the trees, just all these, lights and swirls and so I've got Chris standing right here and I got Wayne standing right here. And Wayne looks down and he goes, "Look at these green lights at my feet." And then he's like, "I'm going to walk over there." And he takes about 2.5 steps. My vantage point, poof, he's gone. I'm like,
Oh my
Wayne. He goes, what? I go, dude, I can't see you. I can see everything going on behind him, all these lights and,
But you can hear him.
wavy patterns. I can see him. And Chris goes, he's right there. And I go, what are you talking? And if I lean over to Chris and I can see him, and I go, Chris, and I yank Chris over and I, right in front of me, he goes, oh shit, I can't see him.
Oh my God.
No explanation for it, and, so stuff like that happens routinely with us.
I've heard this before, though. I've heard this before. It's the Meadow Project. I'm talking to what's his name? Mr. Hudson, Tim Hudson, and he was talking about a field where he has people in the, he has them in the red, their red lights, whatever, the red light spectrum, or the heat signature, whatever that is. And there was a point which they're on the radio with each other. He feels cold, or two of them feel cold out of the three, and you don't see him anymore. He goes, I can't see you because we're right here. Like, they can all see each other, but he can't even see. So that's, but with the lights and say, didn't be able to step over. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And by the time this had happened, the stuff that I've experienced, and that one made me go, I don't have an answer for it. I mean, I don't know what just happened. A lot of people will say, oh, there was a portal there. I can't say that, definitively. What is a portal? What does a portal look like? We know what science fiction tells us portals look like. The closest thing I've ever seen to what might be a portal, I have no idea what to call this. I have no idea. I'm going to try and describe what I saw to the best of my ability. I was at Squatch Camp. There's a pine tree 46 yards away from me. I shoot measurements on all this stuff. 46 yards away from me. It's dark out. This tree, the side of it lights up, but it's the shape of a 2x4. About 12 inches off the ground is where it starts, and it went up about another 8-9 feet. But it looked, in all intents and purposes, like there was a 2x4 there. Okay. However, it was the most brilliant white light I have ever experienced in my life. I mean, it was hurting my eye. I say I've got one, this prosthetic. But I'm staring at this thing, and I'm looking at the tree, and none of the bark on the tree is being illuminated. Nothing on the ground is being illuminated. So there's no light coming out. It was, the only way I can describe it is I was looking into something, and it was very bright white in there.
Yeah, that is so strange. I had a guy who was telling me, I can't think of it, Greg Odins. Oh, I can't think of everyone's names, but he was telling me about that too, where it was like a certain size, 3x4 foot, I think he said, and it said it was like a golden white light. He said he looked like he was looking into like another place, but it was daytime.
Well, I can't even begin to tell you how many times, that we're sitting out there.
Grey goggles.
Yeah. And we'll see a little square white light, or, and sometimes it's like there's a light there, but you almost can't see it. That's the best way I can describe it. The visuals that we get, are just off the chart. And, and sadly, I started directing myself, being more focused on these doggone lights, than I was the actual experiences. And, and so I'm trying to push myself back from focusing on, on twinkle lights and these wavy patterns and distortions, and, and just getting back to the roots of all this, because it's, you start getting stuck in a paradigm. And that's what happens, from what I've seen, watching, different researchers and, other people out, is they end up adopting a paradigm, and they will not let go of it. A phrase I coined, way back at the beginning of this, is don't let your paradigm dictate your experiences. Let your experiences dictate your paradigm.
Right.
Because I could get locked solid on a single paradigm, and I could focus on that, and I could be, this is it, but it's just not the case. This whole phenomena is just so so expanded, so large that, I don't think we're ever going to have, um, rock solid answers to what's going on out there with them. Um, I do know that everywhere that we've been, the Arizona 4, um, it's been loving, it's been peaceful. Um, sometimes they're jokesters. I'll tell you, teenagers are teenagers, children are children. Children like to throw little pebbles. Um, Adults could be doing the same thing, but from what my personal experience has been is that the young ones like to throw the little tiny pebbles. Teenagers, they're the ones that want to go up and rock a camper. They're the ones that come up and shake tents. They're the ones that, hey, let's go scare the stupid humans. All right, I got nothing better to do. You were a teenager, I was a teenager. It's not much different, in my opinion, for them that they're going to be out there, wreaking havoc if they get the slightest opportunity.
Mhm.
I've had them do it to me multiple times, and it's, hey, knock it off, and they knock it off. Um,
Wow. What are you planning on doing with all this research that you're doing, or that
uh,
you guys are doing?
well, we're in the infant stage of this,
Hmm.
because like Chris, he's been doing this for a long time, and he's got a lot of information. I've been doing this for 8 years, but the amount of time that I got out is pretty much unsurpassed. The only other one I know of that even has come out or spent more time out than me is Mark Abel. Um, not trying to toot a horn or anything, but if you're going to get to the bottom of something, you got to put the time in. And I adopted way back at the beginning of this, probably I'd say about 2020, that I'm no longer really focusing on what all these other groups are saying is happening, because I don't want contamination, I guess is the easiest way to
Oh
put
yeah,
it.
yeah, that makes complete sense.
I want to learn about them from them, not Joe Shit the Ragman or Bobby bouncing the ball down the road. It's complicated, but at the same time, it's a pretty simple way of doing things. Um, so we as a team, it's one of the things that that we've adopted into how we're operating is, um, it is being as analytical with this and as possible. And it's hard to be analytical with something that frankly is on the side of spirituality. Um,
Yeah.
so trying to take the physical and the supernatural, and trying to get them to mesh, and they don't mesh. Um, I mean, they do to a degree, but not like you think they would. And the other beautiful part about us, the Arizona 4, is we all have different takes on some of the things that's going on. Um, and we'll sit around. I mean, we spend hours, and sometimes we get into some pretty heated debates, and conversations. What does this mean? What why? How did this happen? Why did this happen? And so the bottom line is, we don't know why it's happening. We have our theories, we have our ideas, and that and $1.50 you can get a cup of coffee at McDonald's. But it's you know I guess what it is we're trying to do, and like I said, we're in the infant stage, is there's just so much that we have that we can bring forward, um, that frankly I don't think very many people know about, and
Okay.
and it needs to be brought out. I mean, for instance, do you know they have their own spoken language? I mean, you hear all the people,
Uh,
whoa, recording the wahs and the hoops, and you know,
yeah,
um,
I've heard it. I've heard it. I don't know if this. I don't want to insult anybody, but I've heard this referred to as like I think it's called samurai chatter.
Well, it's even different than samurai chatter. You know, that's what Ron Moorhead and his team have
What they,
got.
yes.
And it's phenomenal audio. I mean, it hands down is. I mean, I've turned some of my audio over to Ron years ago, and you know, because I can't remember the guy's name, the Navy guy who was trying to figure out the language, you know, because it's what he did in the Navy was listen to languages and broke them
Oh,
down.
like a decoder or something.
Yes, yeah, something in that line. I can't remember the guy's name. Did phenomenal work. You know, but what he was looking for was more full sentences spoken, and what I've got recorded is, you know, a few words here, a few words there, sometimes single words. But their spoken language, when they speak in the natural, there's tribes in Africa that do the same thing. That
yes,
you know, hey, I mean, they talk like that too. So, like the very first audio recording I ever recorded of them speaking was "Hick to Sook," you know, with this metallic click after it. Clearly a spoken language, you know.
right.
And you know, it's not the hoops and the hollers. I've got hoops, I've got hollers, you know, I've got all that stuff. But it's the little nuggets that we end up with that, frankly, I don't think most people have ever heard. You know, is what I'm saying is that we're so far beyond everybody else? No, we've just had experiences that seem to, you know, step up a little bit from what most people are experiencing. I don't know if it has to do with the amount of time that we're spending out. Does it have to do with the family groups that we're dealing with? You know, I don't know.
So you're taking like a isolated, I'm going to learn this, which is the way I do everything. You know, if I'm learning a new language, I learn it my way. If I'm learning the guitar like I did, or stand up, you can't have anyone tell you how to do something that is this. It's something that you have to learn by yourself. So I know that you were telling me that you run audio every time you're there. You got, I can't remember how many hours you told me. It was quite a few.
Thousands of hours.
Thousands of hours. What else do you use? What else are you? My question is, what else are you doing to document this? Are you writing everything down? How are you going about this?
Okay, well, we'll go back to the beginning. It was in the middle of August of 2017. The trip I was out when I got the "what you want" and all that. About the time it was just starting to get the crack of light going on, you know, and I'm laying in my tent and I get woke up to yeah, and it was a female. I mean, you could tell it's a woman's voice. And I just laying there and I was like, well, good morning. And I could hear the footsteps walking away. She's probably about 30, 40 feet away from my tent. And I'm like, you know, I just got yelled at down the hill. I just got, I've got to get an audio recorder. Prior to that, you know, I was running around with a GoPro. You know, I'd hold the GoPro cupped in my hand, pointing behind, you know, trying to trick them. Because like I said, I had no clue what I was doing. You know, so I get this audio recorder, and you know, so every night I'd power it up and I set it down, and you know, I would do that usually about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, so it gets the whole night. And when I wake up in the morning, I go turn it off. Sometimes I go to turn it off, it's already turned off. So I check the battery power. Batteries are fully charged. You know, they came shut it off. I've had them drain the batteries out of it. I've had them wipe out 7 gigs of music off of my MP3 player. But you know, so I did the audio recorder, but what I noticed is every time I took out the video camera, trying to get something of them, trying to trick them, trying to fool them, you know, trying to get video footage. You know, I want to be that guy. You know, I'm going to get that video footage. I tried to do that, and every time I tried to do that, activity go. Well, it doesn't take long, you know, for you to realize that, you know, you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And
then, right. We did that. Yeah.
You know, so it was like, okay, check that one off. I'm not doing that anymore. But the audio, they don't seem to mind that. for whatever reason. And, so from the end of 2017 until the middle of 2020, what was it, 23, 24, I kind of got this stop recording, and I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to record anymore then. And next trip I went out, I took the audio recorder with me, set it out for 3 nights, brought it back, went to plug it into my computer to, run it through so I could see all this,
spikes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And my computer wouldn't see it. Neither of my computers. I can open it up and I can see that the file's on there, the date's on there, and 56 megabytes of information or what have you is on there, and but I can't open it up. So I was like, all right,
Okay.
well, okay, I'm done with the audio recordings. I still have, I could probably spend the next 3 years going through all the audio that I have, because I have not been through maybe a 16th of it,
Wow.
because I'll run the night through on the computer and I'll look for the spikes, but there's stuff on there that even you can't really see on the spikes, like that hick too soon. It was just a random act of luck that I even came across that, because I don't remember what I did, but I'd clicked on the computer at that exact spot and it played it, and I was like, what the hell was that? So I went back and and did some more recording, but so we don't use any technology while we're out, because it's apparent they don't like it, and unless you're out there trying to get yourself a TV show and and just become that guy, okay, go out there and run your videos, but I wish you the best of luck, because they know what it is and they want nothing to do with it. If we come across stuff that we find interesting, we find a good set of tracks, I'm going to take pictures of it, find a nice structure, I'm going to take pictures of it. I even run, during the day I'll shoot video. But we have this thing that I will never do, and this is what I told them, I will never do anything to intentionally try and record you. Now, if they end up in it because they choose to, they're in the, back behind trees and stuff like that, that's on them. I'm not out there trying to, take photographs of them and, or trying to, trick them and get them on video. It does happen periodically, but, it's what is that going to prove?
Right.
I could show you the best video. I could show you the best pictures. I could play you the best audio. That doesn't prove anything. If the Patterson Gimlin didn't prove it enough for everybody, nothing is going to. And
Right.
So for personal use, I like it. It's fun to listen to the audio, and hearing, these different individuals speak. But that's a personal thing,
Right.
I'm in the process of posting some of this stuff up on our Arizona 4 pages, as just, here's something a little different, here's something for you to think about. And so that's why I'm posting that kind of audio stuff. But the bottom line is, with the way artificial intelligence is and Photoshop, no photo is valid, no video is valid. Unless you got a video camera with a video camera and another video camera, and I still at that point in time think that, it just wouldn't be, very viable.
Right.
So for personal use, yeah, it's great. And, and you'd asked about, do I write any of this stuff down? Well, I did for the first 3 or 4 years. I kept a diary, at this day, this happened at this time, and I was very vigilant about it. And I don't know what it had, I was out on a trip and, and I forgot to bring the laptop with me. And, because that's what every night before I went to bed, I'd type in everything that happened. And this one particular trip, for whatever reason it was, I didn't bring the laptop. And I was like, well, I've got it on audio, so I can just listen to the audio, and, and I can, it just became a thing of procrastination, and I ended up just quit doing it. But I've got so much documented with the audio. I mean, the stuff is there, but
Yeah.
I mean, once again, what do you do with it?
Yeah, it's I understand. I really do. I think the way you're presenting it makes me have a clearer picture of what it's like. It's more like for some reason you are having this experience with your three other gentlemen there, and you just kind of want to like just let it be what it is, let it breathe on its own terms. So
Yeah.
with all that being said, I think my next question is, with you would say you have limited experience over, a short period of time with a lot of experience, and you say there's a lot more and you're not understanding everything. But if you had to take like a shot in the dark and were to explain it to somebody like me, what is it that you think this phenomenon is, or this are these creatures are? I'm sorry, that's the $1 million question. I had to do it.
Yeah, and that's fine and dandy. Taking, like I said, trying to take the physical and mash it with the supernatural, or I like to refer to it as the natural because it is natural. But over a lot of time, over a lot of different things that I've looked at. I'll back up. There was a time I was absolutely convinced that they were Nephilim. No, that's not what they are.
Okay.
I can say that with about 99.5%
okay.
certainty.
Please expound, because that seems to be the topic of the day. Like right now, everyone, they're Nephilim, and I don't buy that, because I'm a man of God, for sure, through and through, but I'm not a religious person, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so when people, it comes from a point of view that I'm unfamiliar with partially, and partially don't have a feeling towards that. So you saying that to me makes me go, okay, why do you think that?
Okay. I will give you my strongest reasoning behind it.
Okay.
The amount of love, and I'm talking, not like I love my cat, or not like I love to have a pizza, or I love to go camping. No, this is a very, very deep love that has been broadcasted. It's just intense. That kind of love can only come from the Creator. And if that kind of love is coming from the Creator through them, they're not Nephilim. They're
Wow.
I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to watch this and they're going to go, "Oh, well, you're just being fooled." No, we have dissected this biblically, Book of Enoch, other different stuff. And because of all of the combined experiences that we have, we all, Rob's still kind of teetering on it, but that's all right. Like I said, we don't all agree on the same thing at the same time.
That's fine, but that's fine. That's what you want.
Yeah, you got to have that balance in there.
Absolutely.
I will give you this, and this will be the first time I've ever spoke this publicly.
Okay.
I had some legal issues stemming back 2016. Not going to get into the details of it, but I was looking at serving a lot of time over some, we'll just call it fabricated Second Amendment issues.
Okay.
And so 3 of my trips that I went up there, I had it absolutely set up. PTSD kicked in, total depression kicked in. I was going to end it 3 different times up there. 3 different times they pulled me away from it.
All right, buddy. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Look.
So
you're a former soldier, dude, and I'll let you know that you're always welcome to call me and contact me about any goddamn thing. Don't you ever think any different as well.
Yep. Well, and I'll get into, some of what they've done with this, but
Sure.
so you take an entity, an individual, whatever you want to call them, and let's just say they're Nephilim, and you've got this, very spiritual, born again Christian sitting in front of you, and he's ready to off himself. Are you going to stop him and give him, just immerse him in the most intense love, or are you going to help push him off the edge?
You're gonna try to help that person.
Yep. That's why I don't believe that they have anything to do with the Nephilim.
That makes complete sense for me. And I got to be honest with you, for right now, I was a fence setter, and because of what you just told me right there, and I've never been there. I've never been there, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I've understood how someone can get there. So where I was.
Yep.
Then I agree with you. So I don't think they're that either. What do you think they are? Do you think they're just like a different species? How would you? I know you're trying to meld the two together, but to explain it to a layman,
it is so difficult because the first thing is they don't have to abide by the same laws of physics that you and I are bound to. How that is accomplished, I don't know. I know they're. The Melville Ketchum DNA says mother side's human, father side is origin unknown, and that's what caused everybody to gravitate towards the Nephilim. And it caused me to do that. But once again, like I told you way back at the beginning, I made the decision that I was going to let them teach me instead of somebody else, Joe Shit the Ragman.
Wow, dude. All right, man.
So that's the aisle I had to go down. Now, I've got my own hypothesis that I'm working on right now, but I could be 180 degrees off from what it is. And this is me, the rest of the Arizona 4, they, everybody's got their own thoughts on it. This is me, this is Kevin. I think that somehow they are tied to Esau. Mm-hmm.
I don't know the story of Esau. I'm sure my buddy Jim's going to get me on that one. I have a good friend who's a very devout Christian. He's going to get me on that, but I don't know what Esau is. Please.
Okay. Go to Genesis chapter 26 and start reading. Okay. So you got Abraham and his wife Sarah, and they were like in their 90s before they were able to have a child, so they had Isaac, and then Isaac grew up and Isaac got married. Well, Isaac is pleading to the Lord because his wife can't get pregnant. He's pleading, please, let us have a child. And this is kind of Reader Digest version of it.
Yes, please.
Let us have a child. Well, all of a sudden she's pregnant, and so she gets pregnant, and while she's pregnant, she's got this turmoil going on in her belly, and she pleads to the Lord, Lord, why do I have this? Well, this is because you've got two peoples inside of you. Two different peoples. Okay, so when Esau was born first and Jacob, because they were twins, Jacob came out second. Jacob was holding on to the heel of Esau. Well, Esau, as it states in the biblical text, is he was red and he was hairy. And he was a man of the fields. Jacob was a man of the tents. He lived in tents. Esau lived out in the wild. So keeping that into play, and so there's a bunch of stuff that goes with it.
Okay.
So Esau, his first wife, he actually had two, was married twice, and then it kind of goes off into somewhere else. And then he goes to another land and he ends up getting a few other wives and what have you. But the way this one, that it ends talking about his first two wives, but later on the second wife is mentioned, but the first wife isn't. And, and so I understand this is a huge leap, but it almost ties in. But once again, I don't know. I could be,
of course not.
I could be completely wrong with it. And like I said, the rest of the Arizona 4, they all have their different ideas. This is just me.
No, that's what the real secret to all this is that we don't know, which is why we do it. It's in our human nature to want to know why. and to say what you're saying has just as much validity as anybody else out there, to be honest with you. And as long as if they're serious about it, you know what I mean. There's some people like we mentioned it or not. So I don't think you need to apologize whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, like I said, this is just me, and
Yeah.
and so out of everything that I've looked up and everything that I've researched, and and going into all kinds of ancient texts, and that's just where it's leading me. Something could happen. We're going out here in a couple more days, next week, and something could happen on that trip, and I'll go, you know what? Nope, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about me. If I know something, I'm going to tell you what I know. If I don't know, I'm going to tell you I don't know. And it's the human nature is we have to put everything in a box, and everything has to fit in that box. And with this, I'm trying to put things in boxes, but at the same time, there's just so much that goes on with this. It's hard to nail one thing down.
Yeah, but I understand your reasoning behind it. Your reasoning behind is that right now, you're on the show with me, and you're trying to, reach a wider audience about your experiences. So the way people take in information is in, packaged forms. So when I ask you certain questions, it's for that reason, because I'm, an unknowing person, but I'm open to listen to it. And the way you present it, I think it's admirable. I think it's a good way of going about it, honestly.
Yeah, because the thing is that what we're trying to do is, we don't know the answers to this stuff. There's some things that we do know the answers to. And it's about that much. Like they do what they do and they do it. There's a good answer for you.
Mm-hmm.
But to speak with a surety at this point in time, I really, I would really like to. I would like to puff up my chest and pat myself on the shoulder and say, I know this because this is what happened and this is the way it has to be. I can't do that. That's not being intellectually honest. And integrity and honesty. If you don't have that going forward in this, you got nothing.
True. Okay, Kevin. Before we end the show, I just want to ask you. Let's hopefully a quite easy question. What's next for the Arizona 4? I know you guys are starting out to get some of this information out. What is your guys' plans, roughly speaking?
Well, some of the plans and ideas that we have is, do more podcasts, get out there. One of the things that we're discussing, and it probably won't happen, for at least a year and a half, is putting together a large conference here in Arizona, centrally located up on the Mogollon Rim, because that's the home of the Bigfoot in Arizona, is the Mogollon Rim with the Mogollon Monster. So it's one of the directions we're looking at going is getting a conference going, and seeing if we can get something put together, and just get more information out. I guess the biggest thing is to get people thinking, instead of drudging along, doing the bah, you got to start thinking. And just real quick, here's one thing to get you to start thinking. Everybody talks about wood knocks, banging trees. Going back to the beginning, remember how I told you it took so long for me to find a stick?
Yes, sir.
To be able to break on the tree. Well, when I go out, and I was doing that with an axe handle, and I'd hit the side of a tree and immediately would get a knockback from there and a knockback from over there. Didn't happen all the time, but when it did, it was an immediate return on the knock. So either they're walking around carrying a billy club or a stick in their hand, or they're doing something else to make that sound. That's my belief of what they're doing. They got big hands. They're powerful.
Wow. Okay. Like cup them.
Yeah. And because I've heard those Louisville sluggers hitting the side of the trees, and that's what it sounds like. And I understand, that, the very first thing, and especially with people out looking for, some undiscovered ape, and, they're going to knock a tree for a meeting, whatever. It just didn't resonate with me, and it was just out of heard a knock, and so I did that, and I got a knock back, and I was like, huh, maybe that's what they're doing. So it's kind of what we're trying to do is to get this opened up more, get rid of all the dogma and stigmatism that's involved in this, and get people to re-engage, get people to start actually, thinking, put the thinking cap on. Let's get some, some conversations going. Not everybody's not going to agree on the same thing. It's that's just the way it is. But if we can get people to think outside of the box with what's going on, I think it would greatly help with this big thing.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with me today. I really appreciate it. And say hello to our buddy for us, Chris. And I'll be in contact with him too, so we can help get this information out. This has been fantastic. I thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And and anybody who's interested, our YouTube channel is the Arizona 4, written out FOUR, the Arizona 4 Sasquatch Experiencers. That's our group channel. And my channel is Arizona Squatch. We also just started a Facebook page. Now it is a private group, but you can sign on and and
get accepted.
And get accepted. Because I like Joe Shit the Rag Man. Sorry, that's a military term that we've used for a long time. But we want to be careful of who we allow in, because as there's trolls all over the place. I have no problem handling trolls, because
it's part and parcel for what you do. If you're going to do this, if this is what you are, this is what's happening to you. There's going to be naysayers. My buddy Harley Owens has gotten, he's got so much thrown at him, and he's doing some incredible stuff in Eastern Tennessee. It's kind of part and parcel of what you do. So you're going to have, even if you have a private group, if you're on YouTube, you're going to have somebody write something at the bottom. The best thing, our brains are set up to concentrate on the negative. Just keep plowing forward. And if you're doing, for lack of a better term, the Lord's work or whatever that may be, that you see it, then what's the big deal? A troll is nothing. Just keep moving on.
Yeah, it means nothing to me,
Yeah.
But so our Facebook group is AZ4, the number 4.
AZ4. All right, guys, go over there, and if you're serious about, my group is called the Eye. If you guys are serious, and you want to actually learn some things, interact, please go over and see if they'll let you in. And don't be a fool over there, guys. Be respectful and be kind. But if you're really interested, you would be kind and respectful. And man, this has been amazing. Please do me a favor and stick around. I got to ask you a couple more questions right after the show. Yeah, and thank you, man.
You're welcome. And
all right, guys.
Peace out.
Yeah, peace out. All right, guys. That was it, man. Thank you so much, dude. We are the Eye. We are aware. Love you all.